life was predictable. Too predictable. I woke up every morning to the same routine, getting the kids ready for school, making breakfast, and then spending the rest of the day cleaning up after everyone. My husband, Mark, was always at work. He left early and came home late, too tired to even ask how my day was. I didn't blame him, not really. He was providing for us, and I was grateful for that. But sometimes, I felt invisible. Like I was just part of the furniture in this big, quiet house. The pool was my escape. I'd sit by it with a book or just stare at the water, letting my thoughts drift. It was the one place where I could breathe. That's why, when the pool guy showed up, I didn't think much of it at first. He was just another service person, someone who came and went without leaving a trace. But this time, it was different. His name was Jake, and he was new. Young, probably in his late 20s, with sun-kissed skin and a smile that made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. He introduced himself with a casual, "Hey, I'm Jake. I'll be taking care of your pool from now on." His voice was warm, and his eyes lingered on me just a second too long. I nodded, trying to act normal, but something about the way he looked at me made my stomach flip. I told myself it was nothing. He was just being friendly. But as the weeks went by, I started to notice little things. The way he'd smile when he saw me, the way he'd find excuses to chat while he worked. It was innocent at first, just small talk about the weather or how the kids were doing. But then it started to feel like more. One day, he came over while I was sitting by the pool, reading. He knelt down to check the water levels, and I caught him glancing at me. "You always look so relaxed out here," he said, his tone casual but his eyes intense. I laughed, trying to brush it off. "It's my little escape," I replied. He smiled, and there was something in that smile that made my heart race. "Everyone needs an escape," he said softly. That was the moment I realized something was shifting. I didn't want to admit it, not even to myself, but I was drawn to him. It wasn't just his looks, it was the way he made me feel seen. Like I wasn't just a mom or a wife, but a woman. And that feeling? It was dangerous. Jake started coming by more often. At first, I thought it was just because the pool needed extra maintenance, summer was in full swing, and the heat was relentless. But then I noticed the way he'd linger after he was done, making small talk or asking if I needed anything else. It was subtle, but it was there. And I didn't stop it. One afternoon, he showed up while I was folding laundry in the kitchen. I heard the gate creak open and looked out the window to see him walking toward the pool, his tool bag slung over his shoulder. He was wearing a plain white t-shirt that clung to his chest, and his shorts hung low on his hips. I caught myself staring and quickly looked away, feeling a flush of heat rise to my cheeks. I decided to take him a glass of water. It was a harmless gesture, right? Just being polite. But when I walked outside and handed it to him, our fingers brushed, and I felt a jolt of electricity. He smiled, his eyes locking onto mine. "Thanks," he said, his voice low. "You're always so thoughtful." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "It's hot out here. You must be thirsty." He took a long drink, his eyes never leaving mine. "Yeah, thirsty," he said, almost under his breath. There was a pause, and then he added, "You know, you're not like most of the other wives I meet." I raised an eyebrow, curious despite myself. "Oh? How so?" He smirked, setting the glass down on the edge of the pool. "Most of them don't even come outside when I'm here. They just hide in the house and pretend I don't exist. But you're different. You actually talk to me. Like a person." I laughed, but it came out nervous. "Well, I guess I'm just friendly." "Friendly," he repeated, his tone teasing. I like that. The way he said it made my stomach twist. I knew I should have walked away then, gone back inside and busied myself with something, anything, to avoid the tension building between us. But I didn't. I stayed, leaning against the patio table while he worked, chatting about nothing in particular. He told me about his life, how he'd moved to the area a few years ago, how he liked the freedom of his job, how he wasn't really looking for anything serious. I didn't miss the way his eyes flicked to me when he said that last part. By the time he left, I felt like I was floating. I told myself it was just the heat, or maybe the fact that I hadn't had a real conversation with anyone other than my kids in weeks. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Jake had awakened something in me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. And it scared me. That night, I lay in bed next to Mark, staring at the ceiling. He was already asleep, his breathing steady and deep. I thought about Jake, his smile, his laugh, the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. And for the first time in years, I felt alive. But with that feeling came guilt. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew I was playing with fire. But I couldn't stop myself. The next time Jake came over, I'd be ready. And this time I wouldn't hold back. The next time Jake came over, I was ready. I'd spent the morning picking out an outfit, nothing too obvious, just a sleeveless sundress that hugged my curves in all the right places. I told myself it was just for me, to feel good about myself, but I knew better. I wanted him to notice. And I knew he would. When I heard the gate open, I took a deep breath and walked outside, pretending to be surprised to see him. "Oh, hey, Jake," I said, smiling casually. "I didn't know you were coming today." He looked up from the pool equipment, his eyes sweeping over me before meeting mine. "Yeah, just doing my weekly check," he said, his voice steady but his gaze lingering. "You look nice." I felt a flush of heat rise to my cheeks but played it off with a laugh. "Oh, this old thing? Just something I threw on." He smirked, like he didn't believe me for a second. "Well, it looks good on you." We fell into our usual rhythm of small talk, but this time, there was an undercurrent of something more. He'd pause between sentences, his eyes holding mine a little too long, and I'd find myself leaning in closer, like I was drawn to him. At one point, he reached out to adjust the pool skimmer, and his arm brushed against mine. Neither of us pulled away. "You know," he said after a while, his tone casual but his eyes intense, "you're really easy to talk to. Most people, they just want to get rid of me as soon as possible. But you're different." I shrugged, trying to act nonchalant, but my heart was racing. "I guess I just like good conversation." He smiled, that same slow, knowing smile that made my stomach flip. "Yeah, me too. But it's not just the conversation. It's you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just looked away, pretending to be interested in the pool water. But I could feel his eyes on me, and it was like he could see right through me. Like he knew exactly what I was thinking. After a while, he finished up and started packing his tools. I walked him to the gate, feeling a strange mix of relief and disappointment that he was leaving. But before he stepped outside, he turned to me, his expression serious. "You know," he said, his voice low, "if you ever want to. I don't know, grab a coffee or something, just let me know. I'd like to get to know you better. Outside of work, I mean." I froze, caught off guard by the directness of his offer. My mind raced with excuses, reasons why I should say no, but all I could think about was how much I wanted to say yes. I don't know," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, like he understood. "No pressure. Just think about it, okay?" And then he was gone, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and my mind spinning. I knew I should have shut it down right then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I found myself replaying his words over and over in my head, imagining what it would be like to meet him somewhere, just the two of us. That night, I lay in bed again, staring at the ceiling while Mark snored beside me. I thought about Jake's offer, about the way he looked at me, about the way he made me feel. And for the first time, I let myself admit the truth, I wanted him. Not just as a fantasy, but for real. But I also knew what that meant. If I took that step, there'd be no going back. I'd be crossing a line I could never uncross. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't care. I was tired of being invisible, tired of feeling like my life was passing me by. Jake made me feel alive, and I wasn't ready to let that go. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Mark was out of town for a work conference, and the kids were at a friend's house for a sleepover. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I found myself pacing, unable to focus on anything. My mind kept drifting back to Jake, to the way he'd looked at me the last time he was here, to the way he'd made me feel. I told myself I wasn't going to do anything stupid. I was just going to sit by the pool, read a book, and enjoy the peace and quiet. But when I heard the gate creak open and saw Jake walking in, I knew I'd been lying to myself. I'd been hoping he'd come. And now that he was here, I wasn't sure I could stop myself. He looked surprised to see me sitting there, but he recovered quickly, flashing me that same easy smile. "Hey," he said, setting his tool bag down. "I didn't know you'd be home." I shrugged, trying to act casual. "Yeah, just taking a break. It's been a long week." He nodded, his eyes scanning my face like he was trying to read me. "Yeah, I get that. Sometimes you just need to unwind, you know?" There was a pause, and then he walked over to the pool, kneeling down to check the water levels. I watched him, my heart pounding in my chest. He was so close, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of his cologne, something clean and masculine. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "You know," he said after a moment, his voice low, "you don't have to pretend with me." I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" He looked up at me, his eyes serious. "I mean, I can tell something's on your mind. You don't have to hide it. Not from me." I felt a lump form in my throat, and for a moment, I thought I might cry. But then I took a deep breath and forced myself to speak. "It's just, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck, you know? Like I'm just going through the motions, and no one even notices." He nodded, like he understood. "Yeah, I get that. But you don't have to be stuck. You can do something about it." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Like what?" He stood up then, closing the distance between us. "Like this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a gentle kiss, or a hesitant one. It was hungry, desperate, like he'd been waiting for this as long as I had. And I kissed him back, my hands tangling in his hair, my body pressing against his. It was like a dam had broken, and all the feelings I'd been trying to suppress came rushing out. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. He looked at me, his eyes dark with desire. "Is this what you want?" he asked, his voice rough. I didn't even hesitate. "Yes." And that was it. No more pretending, no more holding back. We went inside, and I led him to the bedroom, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I didn't think about Mark, or the kids, or the consequences. All I could think about was Jake and the way he made me feel. Afterward, we lay there in silence, the weight of what we'd done hanging in the air. I knew I should have felt guilty, but all I felt was relief. Like I'd finally done something for myself, after years of putting everyone else first. Jake turned to me, brushing a strand of hair out of my face. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure if it was true. "Yeah. I'm okay." He smiled, but there was something sad in it. "Good. Because I don't want you to regret this." I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. I knew I should have regretted it, but I didn't. Not yet, anyway. All I knew was that I'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. The days after Jake left were a blur. I tried to go about my usual routine, making breakfast, driving the kids to school, cleaning the house, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still feel his hands on me, his lips against mine. It was like a movie playing on a loop in my head, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't press pause. Mark came home from his conference, and I did my best to act normal. I smiled when he kissed me hello, laughed at his jokes, and listened as he talked about his trip. But it felt like I was watching myself from the outside, like I was playing a role in someone else's life. The guilt was starting to creep in, but it was tangled up with something else, something that felt a lot like longing. Jake didn't come by that week, and I told myself it was for the best. Whatever had happened between us was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I needed to forget about it and move on. But then, on Friday afternoon, I heard the gate creak open, and my heart leapt into my throat. I walked outside, trying to act casual, but my hands were shaking. Jake was standing by the pool, his back to me, and for a moment, I just watched him, my stomach in knots. When he turned around and saw me, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice careful, like he wasn't sure how I'd react. "Hey," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause, and then he took a step toward me. "I wasn't sure if I should come," he admitted. "I didn't want to make things complicated." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Too late for that." He nodded, his expression serious. "Yeah. I guess it is." We stood there for a moment, the air between us thick with unspoken words. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "What are we doing, Jake?" I asked, my voice breaking. This can't happen again. It's wrong." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Is it?" he asked quietly. Because it didn't feel wrong to me. It felt real. I felt a lump form in my throat, and I had to look away. It doesn't matter how it felt. I'm married. I have a family. I can't just throw that away. He didn't say anything for a long time, and when I finally looked back at him, his expression was unreadable. "I get it," he said finally. "I do. But I just want you to know. I'm not going anywhere. If you change your mind, I'll be here." I wanted to tell him no, to tell him it was over and he needed to leave me alone. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He left soon after that, and I stood by the pool for a long time, staring at the water and trying to make sense of everything. I knew what I should do: cut ties with Jake, focus on my marriage, and pretend like none of this had ever happened. But the truth was, I didn't want to. For the first time in years, I felt alive, and I wasn't ready to give that up. That night, I lay in bed next to Mark, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Jake. I thought about the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd made me feel, and the way he'd said he wasn't going anywhere. And for the first time, I let myself imagine what it would be like to be with him, really be with him. Not just a stolen moment, but a real relationship. But then I thought about Mark, about the life we'd built together, and the guilt came crashing down on me like a wave. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and no matter which way I stepped, I was going to fall. Life became a balancing act. On the surface, everything was the same. I was still the devoted wife, the attentive mother, the woman who had it all together. But underneath, I was living a double life. Jake and I started seeing each other in secret, stealing moments whenever we could. It was risky, but that was part of what made it so thrilling. Every time I was with him, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. We were careful, of course. We never met at my house, and we never stayed in one place for too long. Sometimes we'd go for drives, parking in secluded spots where no one would see us. Other times, we'd meet at cheap motels on the outskirts of town, places where no one asked questions. It was reckless, and I knew it, but I couldn't stop myself. Jake had become an addiction, and I was willing to risk everything for just one more hit. Mark didn't suspect a thing. He was too busy with work, too wrapped up in his own world to notice the changes in me. And the kids? They were oblivious, as kids always are. I told myself that as long as no one got hurt, it was okay. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Someone was going to get hurt, it was just a matter of time. One afternoon, Jake and I were at a motel, lying in bed together, when he turned to me and said, "I can't keep doing this." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you mean?" He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "I mean, this isn't enough for me anymore. I want more. I want to be with you, really be with you. Not just sneaking around like this." I stared at him, my mind racing. "Jake, you know that's not possible. I'm married. I have a family." "I know," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "But you're not happy, Sarah. You've said it yourself. You're just going through the motions. Don't you think you deserve more than that?" I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him he was right, that I did deserve more. But the other part of me was terrified of what that would mean. If I left Mark, if I broke up my family, there'd be no going back. And what if it didn't work out with Jake? What if I gave up everything for him, and it all fell apart? "I don't know," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I need time to think." He nodded, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Okay. But don't take too long. I can't keep waiting forever." After that, things started to unravel. Jake became more distant, and I could tell he was losing patience with me. And I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was being pulled in two different directions, and no matter which way I went, I was going to lose something. One night, Mark came home early from work, and I was so distracted that I didn't even hear him come in. He found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring into space, and he looked at me with concern. "Hey," he said, sitting down across from me. "You okay? You seem off." I forced a smile, but it felt brittle. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." He studied me for a moment, and I could tell he didn't believe me. But he didn't push it. Instead, he reached across the table and took my hand. "You know you can talk to me, right? About anything." I felt a lump form in my throat, and for a moment, I thought about telling him everything. But then I looked into his eyes, those kind, trusting eyes, and I couldn't do it. Instead, I just nodded and squeezed his hand. "I know. Thanks." But the guilt was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything. I felt like I was drowning, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't come up for air. Finally, one night, I made a decision. I called Jake and told him we needed to talk. We met at the motel, and as soon as I saw him, I knew what I had to do. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice trembling. "It's not fair to Mark, or to you. I need to end this." Jake looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. I nodded, even though my heart was breaking. "I'm sure." He didn't say anything for a long time, and then he nodded too. "Okay. If that's what you want." But as I walked out of that motel room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.